Ladles and Jelly Spoons, hello and welcome to the Get Up and Go channel, the channel that puts retro gaming first. It's Kohigh Mathy's YouTube channel. Welcome along to Kohigh Mathy's Retrospective Reviews. I'm your host Kohigh Mathy, and let me straight away tell you that the weather forecast for tomorrow is dry and sunny with heights of 94 degrees centigrade, that's 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Before we delve into the wonders of the PlayStation 1 classic that is Time Crisis Project Titan, Pat Whitemuffin is waiting for us on camera too. Pat, what have you got on for us tonight?
Well, just the usual grey suit. But what I do have for you this evening is the winner of last month's joke competition. It was won by Mr. R. York, and he sent us his prize-winning joke. Question: what time is it when an elephant sits on your fence? Answer: time to get a new. Fridge? Fleece? Fork? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, he's won it, so this week's pound coin goes to him.
Thanks, Pat. Well, it's 90 minutes past exactly here at Kohigh Mathy's YouTube channel, and I'll be with you throughout the show, bringing you info on retro games turning 20, time checks, background on voice actors and music, time checks, the usual competitions, time checks, and a host of other great features and time checks. Right away, with the time at 19 minutes past, sit back, relax as we look at 2001's Time Crisis Project Titan.
Time Crisis Project Titan, a light gun shoot 'em up video game developed by Flying Tiger Entertainment and published by Namco for Sony's original little grey box, the PlayStation 1. Whilst technically a spin-off title from the main Time Crisis series of games, Project Titan serves as a direct sequel to the first Time Crisis game.
As this is the first light gun shoot 'em up game that we're looking at, and indeed the first Time Crisis game we're looking at, let's get you up to speed. First off, the light gun.
Light gun shooters, also called light gun games or simply gun games, is a game genre in which the primary design element is aiming and shooting with a gun-shaped controller. Light gun shooters revolve around the protagonist shooting targets, either antagonists or inanimate objects. Light gun shooters generally feature action or horror themes, and some may employ humorous parodic treatment of both these conventions. It won't surprise you to know that electronic gun games were born out of the gun games that had existed in arcades before the emergence of electronic video games. Shooting gallery carnival games date back to the late 19th century. Mechanical gun games first appeared in England's amusement arcades around about the turn of the 20th century, before appearing in America by the 1920s. The British cinematic shooting gallery game Life Targets from 1912 was a mechanical interactive film where players shot at a cinema screen displaying film footage of targets. From there onwards, light guns and gun games would continue to develop over the years. In the 1930s, games using toy rifles were mechanical, and the rifles fired beams of light at targets wired with a sensor. By the 1960s, mechanical gun games had evolved into shooting electromechanical games. A popular sophisticated example of this was Periscope by Namco from 1965. Between the late 1960s and early 1970s, Sega produced gun games which resemble first-person shooter light gun video games, but were in fact electromechanical games that used rear image projection in a manner similar to a zoetrope. Light guns became popularly used for video games in the mid-1980s, with Nintendo's Duck Hunt from 1984 being a popular example. In the late 1980s, Taito's Operation Wolf from 1987 popularised the military-themed light gun rail shooter. In 1992, Konami's Lethal Enforcer popularised the use of realistic, digitised sprites in light gun shooters, with the digitised sprites remaining popular in the genre up till the mid-1990s. Sega's Virtual Cop released in arcades in 1994, which broke new grounds and popularised the use of 3D polygons in light gun shooter games. This led to a renaissance in the popularity of the arcade gun game. The game was inspired by Clint Eastwood's film Dirty Harry. In Virtual Cop, the player has to shoot approaching targets as fast as possible. Time Crisis by Namco released in Japanese arcades in 1995 and on the Sony PlayStation console in 1997. The genre was most popular in the 1990s, subsequent to the release of Virtual Cop. the formula of which was later improved upon by Time Crisis. The genre became less popular in the new millennium, as well as being hampered by compatibility issues, but retains a niche appeal for fans of old school gameplay.
Okay, we've got you up to speed on the genre, now the Time Crisis series.
Time Crisis was first introduced into arcades in 1995. It focused on the exploits of a fictional international intelligence agency who assigns its best agents to deal with major threats by a hostile organisation. The arcade series differs from other light gun shooters of its time by incorporating unique mechanics. Time Crisis focused on shooting all on-screen enemies in an area within a specific time limit to continue on and to continue to complete the level. The franchise's distinctive feature was its cover system. The player stepped on a foot pedal to have the player emerge from cover and attack enemies, and release that pedal to get behind cover, protecting the character from enemy attacks but leaving them unable to shoot. Alongside the main game of the series, it has spawned a number of spin-off titles that have incorporated cover mechanics and time limit gameplay elements, but with notable differences in combat situations and organisations involved in each game's story.
There! Get him!
Time Crisis Project Titan was developed by Flying Tiger Entertainment, a third-party company in the United States, and it was published by Namco as a PlayStation-only title, unlike other Time Crisis games that were released in arcades first. The game took 2 years to develop. Namco opted to create a new game instead of porting over Time Crisis 2, since the specifications of the arcade version and the PlayStation were so different. Time Crisis 2 would eventually be released on the PlayStation 2. Project Titan features the same gameplay as other Time Crisis games, such as the signature foot pedal. Players are by default in the hiding position and they are shielded from taking fire but cannot fire back. In order to begin play, the player must step onto the pedal and begin firing. Stepping off the pedal allows the player to reload the gun and get back into cover. The game introduced a new gameplay mechanic that allowed players to move to multiple fixed locations, which are activated by shooting yellow arrows whilst the player is in hiding. This feature was later reused in the arcade version of Time Crisis 4. Several months after the events in Sersha, VSSE agent Richard Miller is informed by his superiors that the Caruban president Xavier Serrano has been publicly assassinated by a man dressed like him. With no evidence to the contrary, VSSE is prepared to extradite Miller to Caruba to stand trial in 48 hours. With only that much time to prove his innocence, Miller is alerted to the presence of an undercover agent codenamed Abacus, who can help him obtain the information he needs.
Marissa Soleil, Zeus Bertrand, Ricardo Blanco, Cantaris, Wild Dog.
Time Crisis Project Titan.
As far as voice acting goes, well, there's very little information out there on this game. Indeed, there isn't much voice work in the game itself. What I could find out, I would certainly take with a grain of salt. The game credits the names Tim Naig, Mike Gates, Eugene Jarvis and Tim Tamura as the characters in the game. Considering one of the names is Eugene Jarvis, who is an American games designer and programmer, best known for the seminal video game Defender, I'm guessing that they're all pseudonyms. Music in the game, on the other hand, was the work of Tommy Tallarico, an American video game music composer, musician, sound designer and television personality. Whilst the soundtrack is nothing to write home about, I certainly couldn't advise listening to it outside of the game itself. It does at least do a good job of providing good accompaniment to the action that's going on screen. In 2001, Time Crisis Project Titan received very average reviews. The positives were that it was a solid light gun game with good controls and gameplay was as good as it could be. But we were living in a post-PlayStation 2 launch world and the game looked visibly dated. Animation, voice acting and graphics were, as one reviewer put it, old, dated and bad. but it was still well received by the public and Time Crisis fans. One thing that the game did have going for it was there were no light gun games existing yet on the PlayStation 2. The Electric Playground put the game up for its best Console Shooter Game of the Year award, but it ultimately lost out to Halo Combat Evolved.
What do I think? Well, I've always loved light gun games, and although I've always held Time Crisis as the poor man's virtual cop, Time Crisis Project Titan is a solid game. Back in 2001 there had yet to be the big retro boom, so I can't help but feel that reviewers were just looking at the visuals and not the game underneath. I didn't play Project Titan until a few years ago, but I instantly loved it. It was a hit of nostalgia of being back in the arcades. It's a great game to get out when you've got a few friends around. It's just a lot of fun.
Oh, where is he?
Well, we seem to have come to the end of this week's retrospective review. I do hope that you've enjoyed this little look at maybe not a jewel in the PlayStation 1's crown, but certainly the velvet headband that sits on the inside to ensure that it sits comfortably on the head. If you've enjoyed this video, then please do share it out with those closest to you, both emotionally and geographically. Let us know what you thought in the comments down below, and whilst you're there, reinforce your feelings towards this video by clicking the like or the dislike button. And of course, if you've made it to the end of this video and you're not already, please do subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified every time we here at Kohigh Mathy's YouTube channel, located at the Orbital Broadcasting Bunker, Britain's first and only airborne subterranean studio in Mozambique.
Before we go, Youth, I've got a message to read out from Zoe of Maidenhead. She wants us to say hi to Trevor. She says, "Sorry, Trevor," and she hopes that you're still able to cycle.
So before we go, it just remains for me to remind you to be good to each other and always look on the bright side. And remember that an owl in a sack troubles no man. Cheerio.